You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Devil Dog Talk Show. Today we have Christopher Martini, and we're talking about not just himself, but a really interesting and quite honestly, an amazing project in film, Everybody's Angel, the Stuart Margolin story. And I'm really excited to bring it to our audience, to you guys, all our listeners and viewers now, and the YouTubes and all the different things, because there's a massive opportunity to participate in the creation of and the finishing up of the film. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. I'm excited to have you on. Thank you so much for making the time to include us in this conversation about such an amazing project.
Joey, thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk about this documentary. Really appreciate it. So
Anytime. I'm really stoked. Like, I mean, honestly, when we were kind of catching up about the dynamic of the depth of which your stepfather was able to accomplish, I'm really eager to hear about how that influenced you in your journey into film. So I guess that would be the starting point. How did you start this journey in film? Have you always been interested in film and entertainment? How did you start that?
okay, so I'm the child of a parole officer from Texas. My mom was a parole officer, and my real father, who Stuart was my stepfather, my real father was a sculptor from Italy, who taught us a lot about art, architecture, sculpture, art history. But my stepfather was this Emmy award-winning character actor, Stuart Margolin, who was on the Rockford Files. And I fell in love with cinema because it all started in the house with Stuart, because Stuart had all these great movies at home. We had these laser discs, and we were blessed to have a big screen. This was before like flat screens, so we had like a laser disc projector and everything. But he had Orson Welles, he had Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, he had Kurosawa, he had Ingmar Bergman, he had Sunset Boulevard. He also had, the Muppet movie. You can't go wrong with the Muppet movie. I mean, it was like, Kermit, so, but, he had all these great movies, and I used to watch him. I would watch him over and over again, these like deeply psychological movies. But I just, I fell in love with the black and white imagery and cinema. And I was just like looking like, what is going on? Like, what are they talking about? And what's the camera doing? And, it was just, so I fell in love with it that way. So I knew Stuart worked in the film industry, but it wasn't because he did it. It was because I just fell in love with it naturally. But, he helped get me on set where I could learn. But, unlike a lot of, spoiled Hollywood brats that show up on a film set, their parents are like somebody famous, they sit in a director's chair and don't do anything. And, like I actually wanted to cut my teeth. I did every single position on the film set, from production assistant to camera assistant to sound man, then I got into editing and then ultimately directing. I did go to film school. You don't need to go to film school, I don't think, but it's good. You meet people there, you meet all your friends that you're going to work and make films with. And that's a film school as a whole other topic. But I fell in love with cinema. So, I started making my own films because I always wanted to direct. And my sister's a costume designer and my brother's an actor. My brother was in Saving Private Ryan and Contact and The Unit and Captain Phillips, and he plays a lot of military guys. And so I've been making military movies. But so I started making movies and just short films on Hi8 video and editing with them VCRs. And then I started working, shooting on film and cutting on film. And what I realized, and this is my point is that what I fell in love with was learning. What I fell in love with was not knowing what I'm doing, and just being committed to figuring it out. Because what I realized was that, because as I started pouring all my money uh, into these movies, what I realized is if my story wasn't great, then I've really messed up, because I've spent a lot of money. And so I would make these films, I'd spend a lot of money, and I'd get these blank expressions on people's faces. And I was like, I can't let this happen again. So I have to figure out how to tell a story. So it was the process of like figuring out how to tell a story is how I fell in love with it, because once I figured it out and I could see it was working on the faces of the audience, then that's what I fell in love with, just the process of learning and discovery.
That's amazing. I love that because for me, entertainment media, film, art, right? I love that you come from an extensive, I want to say, relationship with art and how to create that story, the depth of character, and understanding why it's important, not just to show it, but to feel it. And that dynamic of viewers, I always find it funny that, for me, I don't know if everybody's like this, but you watch a film, like you brought up your military films, right? And you see, and there's this image of character identity being reflected upon in the circumstance that this character is going through, right? And the dynamic to show, especially in war films, because we don't want to experience, I don't want anybody to re-experience any of that, right? I don't want it to be anything external other than a history where we learn from it. And those that carry that burden, or I want not just revered's one thing, but really attended to and respected, in the sense of saying, how do we avoid more mistakes, right? Just like you coming through film at every layer, right? Not being the kid on the director's chair, but being that young man that's asserting his passion, right? Going to film school, doing all this amazing stuff. I find that to be profoundly important, especially for young people today, right? To reflect about what it is, how did it get you there, why did it get you there. Uh, I guess what I'm leaning into is, how do you find that passion to continue through, and now leading into this documentary, to not just become the director or the storyteller, but the person having to, do the financing, the heavy legwork of how films actually are made.
How do I do that, or how do
Yeah,
I keep
how do you keep your head above water? I'm
yeah.
spinning I'm spinning just trying to think of a good question to wrap around on that one, and I'm like, "But how do you keep your head above water, working in such a depth of, I wanna say, not just this story, but dynamically within the entertainment field?"
Well, film is like having a baby. It's like having a child, So you have this idea. That's another reason why I fell in love with cinema, because you have this idea in your head, and then you go and you write it, and then you have to go find the money to bring it to life. And then once you find the money, you need to communicate your vision to talented people, because you can't do it alone. I've tried. You do need people. And it's communicating that vision to everybody, and just steering the ship in one direction. And so, but back to the idea of a child, is that you bring this child into the world, this beautiful child, and then you have to protect it, because what you're going to find is, like, so many people try to take your child away from you, or influence your child, or if it was a ship, they try to steer it the other direction. And that's the only time when I'm a real asshole, when I'm making a movie. Because if the ship's going off course because someone is asserting their dominance for whatever reason, for attention, or for lack of ability to truly create, so people try to do that. They try, and some people don't even know they're doing it, and of course everyone loves to take credit for your hard work. And and what you have to do is just let it go, and let God decide, that how this is going to go about. And you have to let go of your ego, and just let them feel like they're making this. But they're all talented people, so trust in them to bring your vision to life. But you have to be very dominant when you feel someone is trying to interfere with your vision. So, that's the hard part. The hard part really is the writing of the script, or if it's a documentary, just the writing of the treatment, or just figuring out what you're going to do and the story that you're trying to tell. Once you do that, then it becomes about protecting that. And that can be very hard if you haven't gone to film school, because film school was very good for that reason. When you go to film school, you get to mess up, you get to make all these mistakes, and within the framework, within the comfort of the school, and what you learn is that these things happen, and the more you learn that, the more you know when to step in and when to let go.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It's actually, it takes me, I'm really kind of flabbergasted by it, because the perspective of it isn't just in creation or art. It's really leadership, right? You're discussing leadership and the qualities of continuing through, even if, let the also end, it's okay to get messy. And I think that's what a lot of, especially in the veteran community, a lot of people take too serious because of the fear of failure, right? The backtracking, that fear of not doing as good as you used to, the peak, quote unquote, the Al Bundy syndrome, right? Right. And I think that's really important to highlight, because throughout it all, it's being that leader and showing that qualitative and substantive characteristics within the story, but also in yourself, right? Having a, like you said, you course corrected, and as soon as you said it, I was like, oh man, you're so rock solid on that whole, parent and child relationship, because I have two boys, and it's very much so. You could be hard-handed, right? But you bring up God as well, and I go, what is normally going to work out? It's the soft touches, right? It's the introduction, it's the education, it's the guidance. So I love that film school brings that into perspective, and that now where you're at, you're able to really take on this amazing film about your stepfather. Now, telling this story, right, about your stepfather, how did you come into realizing that this is the time for this story?
Oh, wow. Well, I thought I was too late, because he passed away, but and I had never interviewed him. So what happened was, I had a production company in Midtown. We were to make money to fund my projects. We were doing corporate videos. We were doing really well. Then COVID hit. My partner and I divided. We had two cameras. We had two of each piece of gear. So we divided our gear, and we dissolved the company, and then we went our separate ways. And I was sitting at home during COVID with all this camera gear, and normally I hire cinematographers to go out and shoot. And then, I like for my education to be constant. Like, I'm constantly trying to learn new things. And so I said, I'm going to start shooting. So I started buying more camera gear. I went into that rabbit hole, and but learning the ins and outs of the cameras, the lenses, everything like that. And I started shooting my own documentary. So, uh, since COVID, I've done two feature documentaries. One I shot, the other one I didn't. Both of them were in movie theaters. Got this distribution, and so, but then, before COVID, Stuart died. But what happened was, I realized that I had never interviewed Stuart, and I had been making these documentaries, and I thought, I have to do Stuart's documentary. And then I realized he wouldn't have wanted to be on camera interviewing anyways. So, because he just wasn't that kind of guy. It was all about the work. He didn't like talking about himself. And in fact, whenever we were at home and I turned on the camera on him, sometimes he didn't always like it because he was always on camera. So I don't think he would have wanted to be interviewed. So I just started, planning this documentary. I filmed my mom's interview. I filmed his brother, Arnold, his interview. So Stuart was a character actor. He was in the Rockford Files. He won 2 Emmy Awards. He had a career of 60 years in film and television. He was in all these movies like Kelly's Heroes, Death Wish, Days of Heaven. He was on every TV show, Magnum PI, Love Boat. everything. And and then he did a lot of directing. He was also a composer. He composes on music. He had an album of his that was released by Warner Brothers, so he was also very like musically talented. So I just started putting this documentary together, and I launched this Indiegogo page, and we've actually already met our goal, which is great. It's not a huge goal, but we have enough to go to LA and interview some of the celebrities that worked with him. So I want to try to get Ted Danson, Tom Selleck, David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, who wrote the Rockford Files, Richard Gere. There's a lot of people that love Stuart that worked with him. Howie Mandel, just the list. Stockard Channing, Griffin Dunn, the list goes on and on. So I want to try to get these people. I want to try to shoot the interviews in the Chateau Marmont in LA, this classic hotel that I know Stuart stayed in. And so hopefully they say yes. So, if somebody wants to support this film, just go Google Everybody's Angel and our Indiegogo page will come up. You can donate at any level. Right up to associate executive producer credits. So we're there's going to be a huge cost of licensing archival footage of all these shows that Stuart was in, but at least we can get these interviews in the can, cut a sizzle reel to bring in additional investors. So I'm really excited to tell Stuart's story. What it's about is the character actor. Now, Stuart was a character actor, so it's really about these actors that come in and they play these crazy roles, and you always remember them. You either love them or hate them. They piss you off. It's funny. Like I have James Garner's daughter helping with this. She's going to executive produce it. Gigi Garner. And the official James Garner fan page is behind us, and they're helping push my posts out. But all these fans, like I would say 99% of them love Stuart because he was, but just because he always got Jim Rockford in trouble. But then you've got like this 1% of fans that they hate Stuart. It's crazy. It's like they don't know that he's my dad, and they're like, oh, I hate that guy. They're like, oh, I hate him, and that's because he was always getting James Garner in trouble on the Rockford Files. He was played this kind of slimy Weasley character but the purpose of a character actor is to bring out the good qualities of the protagonist. So his role was essential to the show because it showed what a great friend Rockford was, and how loyal he was. And so character actors, especially good ones like Stuart, when you already have a great script, they come in and they just bring the story to a whole other level, offering way more than the writers could ever expect. And that was Stuart. Like him or hate him, he's memorable to so many people.
To me, that's really important to highlight, is that there's so many levels to creation and art and film and television and entertainment. There's so many layers, right? There's so many different layers to it. To be able to be a part of something that your character elicits such a communal emotion, whether it's love or hate, right? Having a community like that, it's pretty profound. And I think the influence of not just the personality, but the character that it elicits, right? Well, how was Stuart in home life, right? How you mentioned that he didn't like being in front of the camera. If it popped up, he was like, get out of my face or something. No, you didn't say it, but I said that.
That's kind of what he was showing through his face, what you just said.
So what was life like with Stuart when you were actually growing up? What was the type of human being and man that he was?
Well, speaking to who he was as a human being and man, what is that he was one of the kindest, most generous, giving people that I've ever known. And he looked up to James Garner. I think James Garner gave him his shot, and so there was a show called Nichols that Stewart was up for. And Garner was suggested to NBC that they hire Stewart because he saw him in a Love American style episode where Stewart was in prison or something, banging his head on the bars. And Jim just thought he was like crazy and awesome and wanted to bring him in as his sidekick on a show called Nichols. And NBC said no, but Garner insisted on bringing him in, and they did. Nichols led to the Rockford Files, and the Rockford Files led to 2 Emmy Awards. So there's a saying in Hollywood, nobody knows anything. And that means nobody knows, who's going to be great, who's going to be the next star. They don't know what's going to be the next hit. And they all claim to know it, but no one has an answer because Stewart ended up doing great. So, that's what he was like as a human being. He learned a lot from Jim. And what else was it like? Well, in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, like people would recognize him all the time. We'd be out to dinner and people would come up to him and try to get his autograph. And and then being at home, I remember Christmas, I was a little boy, and in walks Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian from Star Wars. And, just because they were friends, and, he had, so I was very blessed, because he walks in with like a red bag, like Santa Claus. And inside this bag are all these Star Wars figures, And so these celebrities like Margot Kidder, they would come to our house. And I always, growing up around celebrities with somebody who's just so humble, like Stewart, like I always thought celebrities were nothing special. So, it's kind of annoyed me when people like worship celebrities and worship Hollywood, because I grew up thinking it's nothing special. And so, like when I was working on film sets, I would do the shittiest, crappiest jobs on film sets, and people couldn't believe it because they're like, oh, why is this kid whose dad is like so, well known doing such crappy jobs? Well, I wanted to learn. And, and so you'd see these celebrities walking on sets with like these giant egos. Oh, don't look me in the eye and all this kind of stuff. And I always thought that's just so ridiculous, because I was around celebrities that were like great models as human beings, like Garner and Stewart. So, it, I learned a lot about, how to be a good person, I think, while, working in film, while being a director, like when you bring these people together to achieve your vision, you're bringing a family together. So when the film's over, you should feel very sad because your family's breaking up. You're not going to see them. So that's what Stewart learned from Garner, is just how to create a family environment. So I worked on the Rockford Files remakes in Los Angeles, and I got to work directly with James Garner. Now, he always insisted on having this giant AC unit on his film set, it was hooked up to a generator outside, and it had like these giant tubes that would like go through the building, and you'd loop them through the building onto the set so he could be blown with air because it gets really hot in LA. It was my job as a production assistant to like haul these dirty tubes through the building, just getting filthy, and people couldn't believe, like, why is this guy doing it? But I got to work with Gardner, and I could see like he treated everybody the same. It didn't matter if you were a star or somebody doing the job I was doing. Everyone was dealt the same respect, and we had the best food in Hollywood. He always hired the best caterers you can imagine, which is like unheard of today, because you see all these producers like cutting corners, trying to put money in their pocket, because if you save money on a film, guess where it goes? In the producer's pocket. right? So you got this movie Rust where like people are getting shot because they don't hire the right person who knows what they're doing because they're trying to save money. They're working people 18 hours a day, making them drive, forever to get to film set, and then they have to go home at night and they're tired, and then accidents happen. So it's just this is when Stuart worked on the Rockford Files. This was like the golden age of Hollywood. And this is when you had guys like Garner who tell you how it's done, how to run a film set. So that's what he was like.
That's so important to bring that dynamic of a conversation, not just set safety, but overall safety. And it, what do they call it? Labor exploitation, right? I think there's so many conversations to be had within unions and the current, agenda. And just like you're saying, the breakdown of intention within cash flow, the waterfall effect, whatever they call it, the water, they take this and net profits for that. Well, however it's distributed, right? I find it that mentality is coming from a corporate mentality where they're being told that the only thing that matters is the dollar, right? And in that, I feel as though personally, don't know how you feel, but in Hollywood, this is what's really costing. I want to say the state of California just an insurmountable amount of creation, potential dollars, tax infusion, rebates, all the things that go on with the film production. But it's that simple mindset, like you said, Stuart had, is to be able to take care of the full set, take care of everybody, right? Jim was able to treat everybody equal in order to make sure that the craft and the workmanship and the product overall is this thing that people not just will want to consume, but it radiates bond, it radiates belonging, it gives, like the kids say, aura of acceptance, right? When you look at that total imagery in reflection, for me, as you were saying, this kid just lugging tubes all throughout, these massive, whatever called the elephant doors probably, and you're going through it. And you're like, hey man, and everybody's like, what the fuck is up with this kid, right? And it comes down to, well, you're putting in the legwork to understand the truth of the environment, right? I go back to the military a lot because leadership has, in my eyes, degraded to the point of no return. Okay, there's a lot of potential conversational points, and I love that art gives people like myself and yourself such an ability to shine light, especially on people like your stepfather, Stuart Margolin. And I like that because to me it makes it fun in the perspective of what is real, right? Because you're right, I think people have the idea of the face, the celebrity, right? And the construct of what a set is, or why, or how a movie is distributed, or what is the actual important part. But the telling of a story, I love horrible movies, and I mean it, like B-rate. I mean, just the worst of worst of worst. There's this movie I started watching. It was called Crack Coon, and I was just blown away, not only by the title, right, but the fact that it was just a replay of the same Cocaine Bear, right? And it was laughable, but in my eyes, I'm going, somebody, okay, so I don't care about the money, but somebody said, I'm going to put this on Tubi, and it ended up on Tubi. Okay, whatever, everybody floats their boat. That goal to have a theatric release, I think, is amazing, but integrating the knowledge of both the dynamic of growth and the scalability of digital marketing and media, and what do they call product distribution, IP ownership, and all the beautiful things that go into what you're building. It makes me happy to hear, that Stuart was this amazing man that really put the work first and didn't want to be, the guy in front of the camera. I respect that so massively because for many years, I didn't want to be in front of a. I can deal with the microphone clearly, but cameras, man, they make my butthole pucker. Is my face look stupid right now? Huh? And that's the thing, is learning video. And you brought this up, the depth of camera work, when you went through the COVID experience. I'm just going to call that now. It was the COVID experience, right? Learning camera work and learning lenses and learning data flow probably wasn't the funnest, right? How do you get so many massive terabytes of information to scale from here to there, and get it in this deliverable codec or edec or whatever, the breakdown of what do they call it when you bounce out the stuff? Because for audio we bounce it out. I don't remember what video does, but when you're actually doing all that hard work, I think it's really amazing to hear that you're the type of person that is not just story first, but the person first, the character first. And I bet your stepdad would be the most proudest father in the world about this story, and bringing it to life the way that you are. That grassroots production, having that Indiegogo fully funded now, and being able to still offer that opportunity to the public. Right. I think that's the most massive thing that most people aren't looking at in art anymore, because it's very closed off. They want that Spider-Man on the way home, or First Day, whatever just came out and is making just massive, an Odyssey. And you have the cross-pollination of artists and celebrity, or just actors. Then you have the cross-pollination of departments, and really where it comes down to is the proliferation of film again, right? Talking about IMAX and the blimpy thing that they engineered, right? All the cool, like really cool things that nobody really talks about in film. So I love hearing about Stuart in this amazing story. I would really love to know, what is the dynamic that you're looking at to not just show, but to really dive into, to represent the story of Stuart's life?
The dynamic. I think it's funny because I think I think now with the onset of AI, I think I'm seeing this as kind of part of the story, because like I know AI is moving so quickly, and it's going to get better and better, and the actors are going to look more and more believable. But I think that you can't create something like Stuart, with a prompt. You just can't. I just think that the human element was so strong. He was able to make the boldest choices. That's another part of this film, is that um, when an actor gets hired for a role, and a big network is involved, or studio, or investors, or there's a lot on the line. And so it's very easy for actors to come in and make choices that are just safe, so that they don't get fired. And I think while I'm making this, I'm realizing that, like, Stewart had so much courage, because he would have this great script, but then he would come in and do the wildest stuff that no one ever wrote, that no one ever expected. And there's like suits, sitting there like this going, you know what I mean? Just trying to figure out if they got to fire somebody. But Stewart would made those bold choices. He never got fired. They always ended up using his scenes. Like, he never got cut out. You know what I mean? So I just think that, like, that level of talent, the human element, just can't be replaced by computers. And I also think that you don't see that level of talent today, because when Stewart died, I was looking at the books, all his books, and I could see, I mean, there's like Chekhov, there's, Hemingway, just everything, all the playwrights you could imagine. He read all the masters in literature, and and so he was like a deeply committed artist, and he loved movies. We would get the Academy screeners, and he would get all the new movies, and we'd watch them together, and we'd critique the films, and he would tell me what he liked and what he didn't like, and I would do the same. And I wonder if people have that same level of love for what they do, and a commitment to learn and study and reflect on what it is they do. I think that's his level of commitment is what brought so much talent to these roles, and you don't see it in a lot of actors, and you watch a lot of movies now, and they're hard to watch. They're not telling kind of the stories we want to tell. They're not very good, a lot of them, and I don't think you see that kind of level of talent where, I mean, like, do we have our own Brando? Could you say like that there's a Marlon Brando out there today, in the actors? I mean, I do watch current movies, and I just don't see that level of talent. I don't see anyone making bold choices like that, and I think there's like a certain level of like dullness that exists in what we see, and just the same thing over and over again. So not entirely, I don't like to generalize entirely, but I would say like for the most part. So I think, yeah, I think this film's going to explore just talent in general.
That's beautiful, right? Bringing into that conversation of where the arts are and where they're headed, and the dynamic of AI is a very important conversation to be having right now. You have studios that are, in LA that are sitting idle. I believe they're maybe at 30 to 40% occupied.
Mm.
I'm guessing until the next year, probably potentially, maybe until next year, right? Uh, all the quarterly stuff that they set up, I find it interesting that the dynamic of what you're bringing to the table isn't just a, hey, this is an amazing man, this is my stepfather, this is, something that I'm passionate about, but being able to sit back and do that with your father there and watch those movies and critique them and bring that skill, right, to bring it back alive here to where you can see and observe the dullness. I mean, 100% agree, right? If you look at society, our colors and the way that we see society is dulling. um Everything we feel is kind of being generalized. We want an opaque existence, we want marginalization, we want what is it called, just repeatability. We don't want flamboyant necessarily, but we do want it in certain specific things. And I think that character driven part of what the arts brings is that freedom and that essence of creation, because then you can find that person there and you say, hey, we don't have any Brandos, can you think of one? I'm like, I tried to as we were talking, right? Or earlier when you brought up Citizen Kane, one of the best films that I watched when I was learning in a film class, right? Is what do you see? What are you being forced to see? What is the dynamics here? What is the lighting? What is this? What is that? And for I believe it was a black and white film. Don't hold account to me like that. But it was one of the weirdest experiences actually communicating, because one, nobody in the class wanted to communicate. They're just there. They're checking off the box. The professor communicates. I don't know. Maybe it's a veteran thing, and I'm just a little bit more confident. I guess not as conscious. And I'll ask a lot of questions, and they would answer a lot of questions, and ask and answer, and ask and answer, and that's how learning works. But I do feel that experience of openness is where society's kind of closing off. Right, we're missing out on not just characters like that your father played here, but the stories that they told, right? The drive that it brings to the full spectrum of the story, not just the, oh, let's laugh about him, or he's silly, or what was the catalyst here? What did it antagonize? What did it make move, and how did we bring the story further along? And being able to do that, yeah, I do think AI is going to be a part of whatever's moving forward. But this eye that, especially that you've developed right over the years, to tell a great story and to share an amazing soul just as you can. I'm really excited to see the final product, but of course be any part of what I can to participate, making it come together, because it's beautiful, right? That, like I said earlier, you got all these places, you're coming out to LA to meet with all these great people, and it's a slam dunk, right? Because when we think about it, as we transition from year to year and technology to technology, we can't forget about where we came from or the foundations that those people built within the craft, right? If we see it as, if it's an exploitation, sure, right? It's always going to happen. There's always going to be massive abilities and opportunities within that. But to dial it in and actually focus in on the substance, I'm really, really jazzed about it. And I really want to, again, put it out there for anybody that's listening. If you're into arts, if you're looking to be a part of something, check out what's the website again for the thing?
Indiegogo.
Indiegogo. And the name of the movie again?
Everybody's Angel.
Everybody's Angel, right? See what you can do. I was looking through it the other night, and I noticed that there's a lot of different layers and stacks. What are the introductory layers, so people aren't like, oh my god, I can't be an executive producer, but I could be right? How do you guys have that set up?
Well, if you want to support the film, you really can donate any amount you want. If you scroll down all the pledge options, you'll get to the bottom where you can just put in any amount. You don't even have to have, to get anything back. But you can really donate at any level. I did want to say that the NBC is actually remaking the Rockford Files right now. So they already showed the pilot and it got picked up. So the Rockford Files is going to be re-released in January. So the timing of this is perfect. I didn't know that this was happening when I decided to do it. Gigi Garner's actually working directly with, the writers have invited her in the room. They want her, they want her to know what they're doing because it's about her dad, and there's a lot of fans that say you just can't remake the show. I'm not going to comment because I do want it to do well, but I think my documentary is going to take us back in time to like this golden age of television. You're going to be watching Stuart, but you're going to be seeing all these great TV shows. And, where I think everything was just smarter. The writing was better. No one was afraid of getting canceled or fired. And, they really could just say anything and do anything. And it was so fluid and quick and smart. And, I hope that reminds people of how good, the arts can be. And I think if you improve the arts, you improve our culture, you make people happier, smarter, you can actually lift up the mood of the country, which is so down right now. And so we really need this is comedy. This is about laughing and enjoying life. And so I think the timing is perfect on so many levels. It is a very niche documentary. It's I'm not gonna lie, I'm making it for the fans of the Rockford Files who knew Stuart. Even for the ones who hate him, I'm gonna make it for them also. So yeah, it's just I think it's going to be great. I'm super excited. Joey, thank you for having me on. I think this is amazing. I've got other stuff that I'm doing. I'm doing a period movie. It's going to be an 8 million movie that I wrote. So I've got some bigger projects, but this is one thing that I know I'm the one to do it, to tell this story. And I think Stuart's looking down, Angel is looking down from heaven. And I think he's very happy. And I think this is another one of his tricks, is to get me to make his movie, even though he's not here. So
the influence of a father, right? I love it. Well, Chris, let's go ahead and wrap it up a bit. I'd really love to let the listeners know, how can we best support your mission and message and be a part of this documentary, as well as anything you'd like to say, shout out, or last thoughts you'd like to let our audience off on.
Yeah, just Google Everybody's Angel if you feel like donating to the film. You've still got till Thursday, the 20th. So yeah. And and then beyond that, go to our Instagram page. There's Everybody's Angel, and on Facebook also Everybody's Angel. X, it's on X, and just follow, because I'm gonna be, you can just be part of this journey and just watch me make this movie, and I'm gonna be updating along the way, and you can see it sort of come to life and grow. As far as any message I want to leave the audience with is, I know you're a veteran. If people don't know my work, I've done a lot of films involving veterans. So just Google Christopher Martini, go to triplemartiniproductions.com, and you can see all my kind of veteran military related work, which I'm deeply committed to still. I'm actually starting a film school. There's going to be, it's an online film school with a physical part of it also. ChristopherMartini.com. It's called Christopher Martini Film School. But I'm going to be in this school teaching veterans how to tell their stories. Teaching them how to turn their trauma, their story, their deployment stories into movies. Because I get so many people coming to me, asking me, how do I do this? And even today, I was messaging someone on Instagram, a veteran, who's like, I'd like to talk to you about adapting my book into a screenplay. And I had to tell him, I said, look, I can do that, but you're probably not going to be able to afford me. However, I have a film school that I'm starting. If you go to ChristopherMartini.com and enter your email and sign up, I'm going to launch it before the end of the year, the screenwriting section, and you can learn how to turn your story into a movie. And then there's going to be a physical part of it in New Mexico, a retreat, where we're going to get hands-on experience making a film, for veterans and first responders and anyone else. I'm working with two guys, Jonathan Delaney Marsh, who's an experienced producer in New Mexico, and Dallas Burgess, who's a veteran turned film director who he says film saved his life. And that's why I'm doing it, because filmmaking gives you a mission. And I think veterans are so well suited to filmmaking, and this is why I want to teach them how to do it.